the future of technology, how will it affect those of us in the enterprise? What will the impacts be on consumers? Paul Daugherty, he is with Accenture. Paul, tell us about your role, your work at Accenture.
Technology is reshaping the world like it never has before. And I think of my role and Accenture's role as helping navigate through that. And there's really three things that I think about when I think about our business. It's our clients, our people, and our partners. Our clients are, where our mission is to help our clients achieve their goals and harness technology to achieve their ambitions. And we're almost 700,000 people strong in Accenture right now, and well on track to be to our goal of 50-50 gender diversity by 2025. And that's a passion of mine as well: gender equality in computer science and tech, with external roles on the board of Girls Who Code and other things in addition to our internal efforts. And then there's our partners. The technology industry, what this is all about is really leveraging the power of all the amazing innovation across all the technology companies, the hyperscalers, the enterprise application companies, the startups, and others, in helping leverage that technology to the first thing I talked about, which is clients, and helping clients apply the technology to improve their businesses. So that's in essence what it is. The formal title is Group Chief Executive of our technology business, which is about $38 billion of Accenture's revenue and about half of the people that I mentioned. And I also have the title Chief Technology Officer, which is about setting the technology direction. It's all those partner relationships that I talked about. It's the roughly $1 billion, $1.1 billion a year that we spend in research and development on improving our business, as well as the venture investing and things we do to drive innovation.
Paul, you have just written this book. It's called Radically Human. It's an interesting title. What does Radically Human have to do with technology?
Radically Human is the second book that I've written. The first was Human Plus Machine, which I'll refer to a little bit. And what we're talking about in Radically Human is a step beyond where we went with Human Plus Machine. With Radically Human, we're talking about what happens as technology itself becomes more human-like. And and how does that create the potential for even greater, radically human, potential and capabilities that we can develop in ourselves? That's the, kind of the balance we're looking at. And I view it as a step, kind of a third step in the evolution of how we use technology. The first step was, people using technology. We had to figure out how to use machines and green terminals back when I was punch cards and things back when I was initially programming. And for a long time, we've been subservient to these machines. And if you think about IT programs, it was about investing millions of dollars in change management to try to figure out how to train people to use all this complex, clunky technology. We moved from that to the Human Plus Machine era, which is what I talked about in the last book, which is about leveling the playing field between humans and technology and creating this human plus, machine symbiosis, so to speak, that we talked about in that book. And with Radically Human, we're talking about the next step now, as technology really becomes more human-like in a lot of different ways that we can talk about. How do we take this new step into a really radically human era, which is really truly augmenting and maximizing, the human potential in us all, using technology in a more effective way?
How do we accomplish that transformation that you just described?
Talking the book about some research we did. We did what we think is the largest ever research study of how businesses around the world are using technology, largest ever study of enterprise technology. We surveyed 8,300 companies, asked all sorts of questions, and we found out some surprising things in the course of doing the research. And another interesting thing was the research started before COVID. So we had cut of the research before COVID, and then we repeated it more recently as we kind of moved to the post-COVID era, and the dichotomy we saw was really striking, and it reflected this change in how technology is being used that we write a lot about in Radically Human. So before the pandemic, our study showed that the leaders in applying technology, the digital leaders, there was about 10% of companies that we identified in this category, were outpacing the rest by 2x, a factor of 2x. Which was striking in and of itself, and there was a way they were using technology that was doing that. And then we redid that research, and we didn't know what we'd find, to be honest, but what we found really surprised us, which was that gap had widened from 2x to 5x. The top 10% were now outperforming the rest by a factor of 5x. And again, it was how they were using technology. We saw things like almost, new technologies being adopted at a 70% greater rate during the pandemic than before. The pandemic being, this forcing function around innovation. We talk about compressed transformation, companies needing to figure out how to leapfrog and become leaders in technology faster. And that's the whole shift that we experience. And then in Radically Human, what we're looking at is what are the underlying patterns in that shift. And one of the things we talk about is what we call the IDEAS framework. It's an acronym. It's IDEAS. It stands for innovation, data, expertise, architecture, and strategy. And what we're positing with the book is that you need to invert the assumptions you have on these 5 areas to really look at how you maximize your leverage of technology and approach innovation in a different way to create this radically human effect.
Can you give us some examples of where organizations are taking this and putting it into practice?
What we're talking about here is, again, flipping some of the assumptions around using artificial intelligence and what it means to create these radically human capabilities. We're talking about new techniques like common sense reasoning, for example, moving beyond the machine learning and more basic approaches and technologies that companies may be using. And the kind of different results that you can create as a result of this. Companies like Affectiva, using who I think you may have talked to one of your programs, looking at using emotional AI in this case, that we're applying with one industrial equipment manufacturer to look at things like the safety characteristics of their human heavy equipment drivers, so that they can understand alertness and awareness and anticipate problems before they might occur. So allowing a person to be more effective, to be more human in their characteristics, but by leveraging technology more effectively. So that's one example. Another example is in the data area. And one thing we talk about in data is moving from big data to small data, from maximum data to minimum data and back, from big data to small data and back. It's big data and the GPT models that have billions of parameters and such are important for certain purposes. But in many cases, what we're seeing, it's the smaller data that truly differentiates companies, and really understanding what's the small data that leverages you. And this can come in a couple ways. For example, in your supply chain, really understanding the small data that differentiates how you make your products, using big data for other purposes, perhaps, but understanding the small data that can drive you to have greater supply chain advantage in the availability and the way you use your goods, for example. Or another example of small data is what companies are finding by using smaller data on edge devices to do some of their processing, because you can't always get it back to a cloud or back to your data center to process with the volumes of information as you move to more edge-based architectures. It's again an example of the small data and what you can do on the edge being more important for some applications than the big data that you can use at the core of the organization. So those are a couple examples. We can go into more, Michael, if it's interesting.
Paul, so is the general idea here that technology advances and the way that we gather, use, analyze data, therefore enables the technology to fit more seamlessly into what we could say the cracks, the crevices, the various parts of our daily life, our business life, so that it becomes more intuitive and ultimately, therefore, far more useful?
Yeah, far more useful, and again, it enhances our human capability. I mean, look, we use AI continuously throughout the day already. So it's already a part of what we do, and it's become part of ourselves. Like the nature of what makes us human, changes as we use technology, or the nature of our human capabilities change as we use technology in different ways. Again, using things like internet search capability, you can it extends your recall powers and your ability to find things, your directional capability, and such in many ways. And that effect just gets magnified as you look at applying those kind of concepts more profoundly throughout the way you run your business and drive your business processes. And that is what we're talking about. And then it's how you use the human capability in your organization. The E in the IDEAS framework is expertise. So we're talking here about things like machine teaching, not machine learning, but machine teaching, which is how do you use human expertise to train your processes and your systems more effectively. We're talking about an example in the book from Etsy, the e-commerce company, where they use their human expertise of their designers to establish design aesthetic, to train, and run different design aesthetic and patterns and such that then enhance the consumer experience that people have on their websites. An example again of machine expert, machine teaching and human expertise being leveraged in a very different way. So I think, as you said, it's that really that amplification of everything we do and maximizing the potential of the human capability. And at the end of the day, it becomes a lot of the the human expertise, the softer skills, the ability of humans to to work together, to collaborate, to understand patterns, to do cross-domain problem analysis and things like that become real differentiators.
What should folks in the enterprise who are listening do about all of this? What does this imply for companies and the way that we relate to technology and business?
It's got a lot of implications for the way you think about things from a business perspective. We talk in the book about first of all the ideas framework and thinking about these assumptions differently. The intelligence, data, expertise, architecture, and strategy. And when you get to the strategy, that's one thing enterprises need to think about differently. We talk about 3 different new forms of strategy that we believe you need to incorporate in the way that you plan for the future. One is called forever beta, and this is kind of the concept that you're never quite done with your product. Think about Tesla as an example, the way Tesla works, and continually new software releases to your car, changing your driver experience as you go. And that's increasingly a strategy and a model that companies will need to follow. Another strategy we talk about is we call minimum viable idea, which is taking all these idea, the IDEA things that we just talked about, and blending them together to create a new form, a new strategy based on leveraging the technology in this more radically human way. And the example we talked about in the book is Lemonade, the startup insurer who has crafted a very different business model, with engaging their customers in a very different way, leveraging the concepts we talked about in the book to create a very consumer-centric way, very different way of constructing insurance products. And then the third strategy we talk about is collab, which is a kind of play on words a little bit, which is collab, which is like collaboration, but it's also collab, bringing the science and technology together, and which we see as a big impact as we look at where technology is going. And one of the companies we talk about in the book is Moderna. And this was a lesson learned during the pandemic of how Moderna pioneered a whole new science of vaccine delivery through messenger RNA, found the treatment, clinical trials through diagnostics, et cetera, very unprecedented pace. And if you look at underneath how they did it, it was a drug discovery studio powered by the cloud, convolutional neural networks, data used in the way we're talking about to drive a very different outcome. And that's the example of that collab strategy to action. So to answer your question, that it's a different way of thinking about the strategy. It's much more dynamic, living way of doing your business and IT strategy together than companies have previously done.
What about the convergence of enterprise technology and consumer expectations?
It's all becoming inextricably woven together if you think about how technology is proceeding. So I'm not sure you can differentiate the two anymore. It's if you look at what's happening with technology, from artificial intelligence to the Metaverse, to Web3, to anything that you might mention. It's the worlds are blending together, and you can't think about it as distinctly. And I think that's creates a great opportunity for CIOs and for enterprise technology organizations in terms of approaching technology differently. So some of the implications we see, and we talk about in the book and in the rest in the other work that we do, is things like the product development, and how do you shift to a product, from a IT mindset and a service mindset to a product mindset, and product development mindset, product management disciplines and such, which is becoming essential as organizations look to shifting from IT as kind of running the business to IT producing the digital products that enable the business, which is the journey that all organizations are on, are on some degree of change on right now. So that's a dimension of change. I think there's a whole set of changes around what does it take to integrate consumer experience with the enterprise experiences. And this whole idea of experience-driven technology, which is a whole chapter in the book. There's a whole chapter in Radically Human dedicated to this idea of experience and creating experiences in the right way. It's really essential. Those companies that can create the better experiences for your consumers or your workers, for that matter, will be the winners going forward. And that doesn't just mean in the B2C market. If you're in a B2B business, it's how do you work with your business partners and such and create those distinctive experiences in different ways, and creating that experience, experience design and design thinking kind of mindsets around it. Again, all organizations are on some stage of that journey, but it becomes increasingly relevant as you look at this. And then there's an element also around trust. And again, there's a whole chapter in the book devoted to trust, because if you think about experience and you think about technology and you think about AI and Metaverse and all these new technologies, the issue of trust increasingly comes up. And I would be willing to make a wager with all of you that as we look into the next decade, the biggest differentiator among companies will be the degree of trust that you can engender with your consumers and workers, because the trust is going to allow you to get the data and have the access to create those experiences that are really going to differentiate you. So trust becomes a fundamental capability to think about, and really understanding deeply what things that you do increase the trust, what things that you do, erode or challenge the trust that you have with all of your stakeholders. It becomes really critical. So those are some of the things that I think are really becoming a center of thinking as you think about this consumer and enterprise blend that's happening. And as we look forward, we can get into Metaverse and Web3 and some of these things. It's even more pronounced as we look to the future of where digital technology is going, which is increasingly in that direction as we talk about in the book.
On Twitter, Louis Columbus, who's a great software industry analyst, really latches on to this idea of forever beta that you were just talking about. And it seems that a fundamental aspect of all of this is really changing the relationship that we have to technology, which for many organizations, for many of us, it requires such a huge mindset shift. How we think about the technology, how we think about technology development. For example, forever beta is a different way of developing software.
One is, I think, one of the most challenging jobs of any in the today is the CIO job, because of some of these changes going on. Because if the CIO has to, keep everything running, keep the organization, and all organizations are so technology dependent. I think we saw during COVID what a lifeline technology was to keeping every organization running. But the CIO role needs to be so much more beyond that. It's about, as you said, Michael, and as with the question, coming in, it's about innovation. It's about thinking to the new and changing the approach. It's about inspiration. And I'm intentionally using eyes with all these. These are the redefinition of the CIO. It's information and infrastructure to innovation, to inspiration, inspiring the business, the business colleagues in terms of what's the power and the new way to apply technology. It's the intelligence officer in terms of understanding, different possibilities and what's out there. It's the inclusion officer in terms of looking to create the talent and build, the inclusive and diverse talent that you need to build technology properly. So I think the CIO role is increasingly stretching along these different dimensions, which makes it hugely exciting, but it also makes it a very challenging role. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we all need to do, all of us that are involved in technology and applying technology need to really do and think about, is helping reimagine, what the future can be, how reimagine how you can do the business differently. Because I think too often we get stuck in seeing a new technology, just pasting it in and applying it the same way we're doing things before. And there's a real need to resist that temptation and look at how we really create that change as we go forward, which is why we fundamentally wrote Radically Human.
Can you elaborate, Paul, if you were a CIO, a chief information officer today, what would you be doing with respect to all of this?
I'd be trying to really create a learning organization, because things are moving so fast that you really need and by learning organization, I mean a learning organization within IT, but also a cultural change to help inspire the rest of the organization to be a learning organization, because with the technology moving as it is, IT needs to move faster and reinvent themselves every day to understand the new technologies and what the possibilities are. And the only way to do that is by creating a learning environment, a learning organization. We have something we call TQ, Technology Quotient, which is something, kind of a way we use to educate, inspire, and inform all of our people in addition to all of our other learning platforms. And encourage everybody to really think about that, because you can't go hire. The point I keep making, you can't go hire the skills of the future because they don't exist yet. You have to figure out how to create them in your own workforce, in addition to refreshing and bringing in some from the outside. And then you need to do the same in the business, because a lot of the next generation of technology is about democratizing technology access and impact. And so it's creating the learning capability within the whole organizations. You're democratizing through low code, no code tools in terms of creating business capability. You're democratizing decision making through data analytics tools and AI tools that are available to more people across the business and such. So the single thing I would zero in on is a learning organization. The organizations that can learn faster and spread it faster than the organizations, I think, are going to be well positioned for the future.
Let's go to some questions from Twitter. And Arsalan Khan says, large organizations have tons of data that they can use for innovation. How can small businesses compete when they don't have that much data to work with? And I will just add, when they don't have that much data, but also their level of sophistication and access to sophisticated skills is less compared to large companies.
There's two sides to that, because I think large organizations do have access to data and sometimes more data and such, and the skills. But this democratization of technology is real. The capability that you can easily access through the cloud, the cloud platforms, the AI engines and capabilities that are widely available is profound. And it really does democratize the access to smaller organizations. Yes, if you're in a really small organization, do you have somebody who can, has the time to go out and learn those tools? That may be a challenge in some cases, but it's very different than the way it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, where you need to stand up teams and data centers and infrastructure and make big investments to get this stuff working. You can access a capability through an API and a service in a cloud platform and funnel data in very quickly to do some very profound analysis. We write about some examples of in the book about very small organizations who have taken advantage of that capability to improve their businesses. So I think there's two sides to that. Yes, big organizations have an advantage, but the democratization of the technology combined with some new learning technologies. We talk about few-shot learning, for example, which is a much simpler way, sometimes powered by the cloud platforms, to train AI algorithms based on just a few instances of data rather than hundreds of thousands of instances of data. Those types of techniques, stand to leverage the playing field more.
There's a real opportunity for smaller businesses because it's just so much easier and so much cheaper, for one thing, to build that infrastructure that you were just describing.
That's right. And there's a lot of publicly available data and such as well. And the different platforms are opening up different sources of data. So it's all about, figuring out if, any small business is going to have this strategy of what differentiates you, and then figuring out how do you get that data, whether it be big or small, how do you access some of that data to create the advantage you need.
We have another really interesting question, practical question from this time on LinkedIn. And this is from Suman Kumar Chandra, who says, how can CIOs bring themselves up to speed to decide which technologies will be most useful for their business and how to use them when there are just so many technologies on the market? Every day, new technologies are coming up. And how in the world do we prioritize and find our way through this forest of great technologies?
That's, again, another reason why the CIO job is a challenging one, because the old technologies don't really go away. They're still out there somewhere in the closet, and you need to take care of the current and legacy technologies as you investigate and learn about the new and apply the new. I think there's a couple things I would say. One is it is about prioritization and figuring out those things that do make a difference to your business, and channeling or prioritizing and allocating the appropriate amount of resources based on that. So, for example, if you take different categories of technology, I'd say with cloud technology, we see as many organizations, most organizations moving rapidly to cloud. Roughly we see about 30%, most organizations having about 30% of their workloads in the cloud, on average. A lot left to go with the cloud migration still. But what's important about that, if you look at that 30% statistic on cloud I just talked about, if we ask another question about how much are you really leveraging the power and innovation of the cloud, only 13% of companies say they're really doing that. So 30% of the workloads in the cloud, only 13% believe they're leveraging the innovation, because getting the workloads to the cloud doesn't in most cases deliver the full potential yet. So, and that's kind of part of the answer to the question of prioritization. To the extent you can get to the cloud, which is not just about cheaper compute, it's about standardized platforms that allow tremendous access to innovative capabilities and services and such, and becomes the platform to drive your innovation at greater velocity. And that's one thing I would say is that we see in what we hear from customers as we help them move to the cloud is getting there is one thing, but then really growing and innovating the business in the cloud is where they want to go from there. So there's kind of prioritized like that. I'd say that's kind of a strategy to prioritize so you can get to a more innovative, higher velocity innovation environment. As you look to things like artificial intelligence, I think every organization needs to be investing in artificial intelligence in different ways. Do you need to be doing, again, the most sophisticated deep learning neural network models in every part of your business? No, but probably not. But you should be looking at where it can make a difference, and also have teams looking at studying the new techniques, studying the new evolving techniques, the common sense, emotional AI, and other things, so that there's some effort being applied on that and some effort being applied on scaling the real capability and creating the centers of excellence for that you need to drive. Then as you look at newer things, Metaverse, which is coming on the scene and probably the most talked about technology, maybe the most, it's probably the biggest surge of interest we've ever seen in any technology over my 30 years has been in what's happening with the Metaverse in the recent times. And that's a technology where, again, it's not just for tomorrow. There's implications of it today, and depending on your industry and what part of your business you're looking at, there's moves you need to be thinking about today and making today. In addition to probably areas you need to be learning about and applying. For example, thinking about augmented experiences for your workers and virtual experiences for onboarding employees and training employees, which we do at scale in our company as an example. That's today. Thinking about at scale NFT-based products and how you're going to leverage digital currencies and such certainly should be understanding, and maybe dipping your toe into those as well. But at least in the understanding curve on. So I kind of look at it as a prioritization across the spectrum, and really keeping an open mind as you look at the prioritization.
Be sure to subscribe to the CXOTalk newsletter. Hit the subscribe button at the top of our website. So, Paul, the metaverse has become very important to you. You just formed, I believe, a new business unit focused on the metaverse. Why? Why does the metaverse matter that much?
What we've done is, to think about the metaverse. We started this in Radically Human, and then we released our technology vision and expanded it on this concept. We really believe that businesses need to frame the way that you think about the metaverse in a different way than you hear about kind of generally in the media. The metaverse isn't just about consumer. It's not just about NFT and cryptocurrency. The metaverse is really about the next stage of how we create digital experiences. We call it the metaverse continuum. And I'll come back to what I mean by continuum in a minute. And that's an important way to think about it. If you reframe your thinking this way, then a lot of aspects of the metaverse become relevant immediately and today. And as a fundamental driver, and why I believe you can't ignore the metaverse, is because it really is driven by fundamental technology advances that are happening, whether you want them to or not, or whether you like it or not. They are happening, and they're opportunities and generally positive changes that are happening with technology. And Web3 is a big part of that. So Web3, the technologies coming out about Web3 do enable a new set of experiences that are enabling the metaverse capabilities. Web 1, of course, being search and basic data on the internet, where Google search was the killer app. Web 2 being about a decade ago, social, mobile, apps and such came online, and you saw, the sharing economy companies becoming, being the killer apps as 4G and other technology proliferated. That was Web 2. And now we're seeing Web 3. And Web 3 is adding two new capabilities. Web 3 is adding the Internet of Place, which is shared collaborative spaces, not just through virtual reality, but through 2D reality or 2D interfaces as well, phones and laptops. And it's also creating an Internet of ownership, for the first time having real distinct, provable, verifiable identity, authenticity, and ownership, which you couldn't have in the internet, where if something forwarded once could be forwarded a million times. And that Internet of ownership and Internet of Place is creating a potential for transformation bigger than the jump from Web 1 to Web 2. And that's why I believe the next decade of digital transformation is going to be bigger than the decade before. It was just 10 years ago. Michael, you mentioned we just introduced our Tech Vision this year, earlier this month, and the title was "Meet Me in the Metaverse." Our Tech Vision 10 years ago was titled "Every Business is a Digital Business." And when we said that 10 years ago, when Web 2 was coming online, people disagreed. They thought that was far-fetched and such, but it really quickly became reality. And the last 10 years has been about every business moving to become a digital business. I think with Web 3 coming in the metaverse, it really is about a decade of even bigger transformation than the one we've seen, because the new technologies fundamentally change the inside of how you do digital, not just they don't just wrap digital around what you were doing previously, which is why this is something every business leader and technology leader needs to understand going forward. And the final point on it is what I mean by the continuum, as you reframe it, is it's not just about the consumer things you read about, Bored Apes and different things you might see out there, Roblox and such. It's about the employees and what you do. We'll onboard 150,000 people in Accenture using virtual reality into our nth floor metaverse this year. We've hosted our leadership, our board, and others, and many clients in the metaverse. And so it's creating those new experiences for employees and workers, not just consumers, and changing the way you work. It's not just about 3D experiences. It's about the 2D and how you blend the 2D and 3D. It's not just about the virtual. It's about reality, how you combine augmented work and digital twins and edge and such in to create a streamlined and integrated virtual to real world and back type of experiences. And it's a continuum in terms of time as the metaverse and Web3 and these technologies mature over time. So I believe, if it's not obvious, I believe this is a big deal. I think this is going to be one of the things, along with a few others that I can talk about, that'll define the next decade when you think about how you apply technology.
What's a time frame for adoption of these technologies of the metaverse, do you suppose?
Like any wave of technology, it gets a label after it's been around for a while. So we were doing cloud work before the cloud became, commonly used. It was called utility computing and other things, as you'll recall back from the day. Similarly, augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain, digital currencies, all the constituent components of this digital twin technology. These things have been around. What's happening with the state of technology is the standards are converging, the scale is increasing, and some of the new technologies are coming online to enable you to do this in an integrated way as an enterprise. So it's already happening. We have companies doing interesting things. As I said, we'll onboard 150,000 people into what we believe is the biggest enterprise metaverse, which is our nth floor. We're doing interesting work for clients around augmented reality, so that you can use a digital twin to simulate performance, and then use augmented reality to change plant performance in real time. Things like that, blending the experiences together. For training organizations, very sophisticated organizations, in real time using the technology, many different applications. I'd say in retail and financial services right now, overwhelming interest and a lot of experimentation and real work we're doing with clients around creating their metaverse retail presences, their metaverse products. How do they bridge the real products and the digital products? Things like Gucci's purse selling for more in Gucci's purse sold for more in their metaverse than it did in the real world. Things like that are raising a lot of interest and attention.
One point that I find very interesting is you're thinking about the metaverse, thinking about digital twins as part of the talent culture and training because historically we've thought about digital twins as being manufacturing equipment, simulating a jet engine or a nuclear reactor, for example.
My view is that we're on a journey that's going to happen relatively fast for the enterprise itself and business itself to be a digital twin. The analogy I'd use is thinking about an annual report a few years from now. The annual report today, you read it on paper, you poke something online, kind of one way. Think about an annual report where you could step into the company's boardroom, interact with the executives, then hop off to a retail store and see how consumers are engaging with the product. Then go over to a plant and see how they're manufacturing it. That's not too far in the distant future. And think about the engaging experience that you can create there. And as an executive at the company, think about having that same kind of capability, so you could see a digital twin of the business and simulate different kind of operating characteristics and environments, and change and reconfigure the business as a result. That is the path we're on, I believe, with enterprise technology. And again, the current wave of digital has been a little bit of the wiring the plumbing to allow that to happen. And the next stage that we're entering into is a real exciting stage to really run business differently. And this is why the connection to radically human comes back in, because I think this is a really interesting future in terms of the potential of workers, the potential of leaders, the potential of consumers to use services in a much more compelling way.
And Wayne Anderson says, what kind of, he says, anti-patterns have we picked up during this tech and human symbiosis that will hold us back from developing as radically human as the way you've been describing it? So what do we have to change?
That is something that we need to work on. And that, to be honest, that's why I wrote the first book, Human Plus Machine, because I was concerned about the anti-patterns and we wanted to put them out there and show how they could be corrected. And a lot of the work of Human Plus Machine was showing positive potential and how to overcome things like the fear of the technology, the fear that was going to put everybody out of their jobs, the fear that it was going to take over the human race, and all these things which we fundamentally don't subscribe to. I think some of those same patterns are still out there, because there's a fundamental human behavior that we're the ones who create technology. So technology doesn't create itself. We create technology, and then we fear it. And so there's this dynamic with every technology that comes about. And we're seeing this with Metaverse right now, and a lot of backlash against Metaverse, justifiably so, because there are a lot of real considerations around trust and privacy, inclusion, children's access, many other things that are real concerns in the Metaverse. But that's true of the real world. It's just a mirror of the real world and a mirror of us. And they're all things that we can deal with in the right way. So one of the things we talk about in Radically Human, and we also talk about our tech vision, is this idea of responsibility and trust. And we believe that in the Web 2 era, we didn't really start Web 2 as a industry or as a technology industry. We didn't start Web 2 with enough focus on responsibility and setting it up to avoid the anti-patterns, as you say. We're at a point with Web 3 and Metaverse where we can get it right this time. And that's why we're really, as an organization and individually, I'm really focused on all the elements of responsible metaverse, which is trust and safety around use of the internet. It's data privacy and identity, which again, there's very promising solutions to with the Web3 technologies. There's inclusion and behavior on the internet, on the metaverse. I'm sorry, and a variety of other things that we all need to focus on. I think it's all of our obligation to really study and understand these things, so that as we build our early forays into metaverse or with any new technology, we're applying it in a responsible way and avoiding, as you say, the anti-patterns. The other big issue that I've been very focused on for a number of years and still very focused on is how do we create the right environment and skills to enable this and allow those that don't have the digital skills to succeed in the new environment. And that's why we've been very focused on reskilling and talent creation. How do we create people who can fill these new jobs that don't exist at scale yet, the world builders of tomorrow, the AI ethicists and such. And that's why we're donating all the net proceeds and royalties of Radically Human to organizations who are focused on reskilling those who don't have current access to those skills, that they can have viable skills in the new economy that's being created.
Bhagya Subbareddy says, can you share a few tips with CIOs on how to bring business along the journey of the reimagined future? Specifically, she's talking about managing change for large global organizations that are risk averse.
two things. One is education, and really just focus on the education, because I think that goes a long way. Education, case studies, and ways to help people understand the impact. And the second is advice that we talked about as we're releasing our Tech Vision, which is an approach of think big, start small, and scale fast. So think big and educate around the big potential. Start small and in a focused way where you can prove the results, but do that in a way with the architecture, the foundation, the approach that you can scale it fast and meet the expectations of the business as you go.
Arsalan Khan comes back and he says, to be a data-driven organization, we need to have culture and executives that have no veto power over data recommendations. Do you agree or disagree?
You need is a clear and unified data governance approach, so it's clear who can make the data decisions. I think in too many organizations, the data governance is fragmented and not clearly understood, and so you end up with different versions of the truth and all sorts of things. So I think I agree with the question, but I think it comes down to a single agreed upon data governance approach.
Shailesh Pachuri says, what is the mantra for success when it comes to adopting current technology? What's the foundation? How to be successful?
Business value and human acceptance. So, implementing something that clearly improves the business, that people see the value of doing it and support it and rally behind it, and the human acceptance, doing it in a way where some of the concepts we talked about today, the machine teaching, the experience, the trust are thought about in a way where people are accepting and using and maximizing use of the technology to increase their own potential.
Okay, and with that, unfortunately, we are out of time. We've been speaking with Paul Daugherty. He is the Group Chief Executive for Technology at Accenture. He is also Accenture's Chief Technology Officer. He wrote this book. It's called Radically Human. His previous book was Human Plus Machine. And with that, Paul, thank you so much for coming back and being a guest on CXOTalk again.
Well, thanks. It's always a pleasure talking. I look forward to the next time as well. And the time really flies. So thanks to you and your audience.
And speaking of the audience, thank you, everybody, for watching, and especially to those folks who asked such insightful questions. I love the CXOTalk audience. You guys are so smart and so experienced, and I certainly learn a lot from your questions. Before you go, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button at the top of our website so we can send you our newsletter and keep you up to date on who we have coming up as guests. Thanks so much, everybody. I hope you have a great day, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.